You know, the boy who cried wolf, right?
Yeah.
Such a simple tale, or so we think, about trust, consequences. We all grew up with it. But what if there's like a modern version of that story playing out all around us, in our relationships, how we talk to each other? And it's way more complicated than just telling a lie.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We've got this really intriguing set of reflections and a modern fable that sort of flips the script on that classic story. Our mission really is to unpack why sometimes, well, why our honest tries at connecting just don't seem to land, and what it means when the wolves we're facing are things like loneliness or burnout, not just actual predators.
Yeah, so we've got this fascinating new fable, The Boy Who Called Out, and alongside it, a reflection that really peels back the layers of the original Boy Who Cried Wolf. We're going to try and connect those insights directly to, well, to your experiences. Things like vulnerability, communication, even how things like AI fit into finding connection these days. Yeah. So let's get into it.
Okay, so Aesop's The Boy Who Cried Wolf. We all know the basics, right? The cautionary tale. You lie repeatedly, people stop trusting you, and boom, when the real danger shows up, you're on your own. It's about trust being fragile, hard to rebuild. But you're saying there's more to it, deeper stuff hidden in there.
Oh, absolutely. When you really dig beneath the surface, it's quite profound. Psychologically, think about the boy. Is he just being malicious? Probably not always. The sources suggest he might be, craving engagement, attention. It hints at this very human thing where we escalate our behavior when just talking doesn't work, especially if we feel ignored or undervalued. It's subtle, but it's powerful. And the villagers, their reaction isn't just simple annoyance either, is it? It's almost like a collective defense, protecting themselves from the emotional drain, the exhaustion of all those false alarms.
Right, and it throws up that really tough moral question, too. Even if someone has misled you before, do you still owe them, like, the benefit of the doubt in a real crisis? The fable gives a pretty clear no, but, well, real life. It's rarely that black and white, is it?
That really hits home when you think about today, all the noise online.
Totally. It's incredibly relevant now. Think about our age of clickbait, outrage cycles. It's
Yeah.
a kind of constant crying wolf, isn't it? Sensational headlines, maybe even misinformation. This constant hum erodes public trust. It makes it genuinely hard to tell what's a real warning and what's just noise. So the challenge isn't just don't lie, it's don't let real urgency get lost in the static.
And the flip side, too. What if the warning is real, but the person gets labeled an alarmist?
Exactly. Dismissed until it's too late. It highlights that really tricky balance, knowing when repetition is manipulation versus when it's a genuine urgent warning that needs hearing.
Okay, so to get a better handle on this modern angle, let's bring in that new fable, The Boy Who Called Out. So in this version, the boy doesn't have sheep. He has a flock of stories, thoughts, and truths. And he wants to share them. So he calls out, "Come listen. I learned something." Or maybe, "I'm feeling something I want to talk about."
And the villagers' response, it's quite telling. They'd look up, maybe give a polite wave, a few might stop for a second, but mostly they just drift off, saying things like, "Oh, that's nice, but, we're busy." The boy gets it, people have lives, but still, that feeling of distance grows. The hill feels far away.
And here's the real kicker, the paradox. The villagers themselves. They often talked about being lonely, yearning for deeper chats, for real connection. But when the boy actually offered it, right there on the hill, they rarely made the climb. It wasn't malice, maybe, but they'd just sort of forgotten how. It took too much effort, too much time.
So the boy gets creative. He builds a tower on his hill, a place to write, make art, and even talk to these clever machines that could listen without getting tired or needing to rush off. He invites people up. Some come, look around briefly. Others kind of frown, saying, "That's not real connection. You should talk to people."
But they missed the point, didn't they? He wasn't hiding in the tower. He built it to keep watch, to watch for wolves.
Right. And the wolves here, they're different. In this fable, the wolves are things like loneliness, burnout, that quiet ache you feel when nobody asks about what really matters to you. He learned that if he just waited for the villagers, well, the flock would be left unguarded. So he stands watch himself from his tower.
Which brings us to the moral of this story. It's powerful. It says, basically, in our distracted world, just telling people, call out when you need us, that's not enough. We have to remember how to answer, how to make the climb. And if we can't, we shouldn't shame the ones who build their own towers to keep those wolves at bay. So let's pivot now. How does all this, these fables, these ideas, how does it connect to your own life? Maybe you've been there. You share something vulnerable, something real, a need you have. And the response isn't quite there. Not sustained anyway. You can feel, like the sources say, almost like you broke some rule, lost credibility, even though you were totally honest. Your truth just hit dead land.
That's what we're calling the emotional parallel. It's fascinating. In Aesop's story, the villagers stop coming because they expect a lie, a false alarm. But in your case, maybe people respond shallowly, or they stop engaging deeply because they sort of subconsciously expect the need will just resolve itself. Or maybe they think, oh, you've handled this before, or they're just not tuned in enough to see it's still a thing. But the result feels the same. When you really need them, the biddingful support might not be there.
Which traps you in what the sources call the vulnerability loop.
Right.
You share something real, it gets acknowledged maybe, but not really integrated. People might nod along, then just go back to how they usually interact. So you adapt, you handle it yourself. And here's the kicker. People then learn unconsciously that they don't actually need to step up differently because you'll manage anyway.
And the hidden cost there is huge. Over time, you might even start filtering yourself, thinking, oh, I shouldn't bother them with this. You keep trying, maybe hoping things will shift, but that deep reciprocity, it just doesn't quite catch up. And the really poignant part, you start associating vulnerability not with connection, but with this sort of mild disappointment. Even while you still believe in it, value it.
So the modern twist on the moral seems to be this. Even honest signals, truthful calls for connection, can end up being ignored if they aren't met with real, sustained, reciprocal attention. And without that, well, the person sending those signals might just learn to stop calling out altogether.
It's interesting how often busy becomes the go-to excuse, isn't it? It's like a polite shield for something deeper. Our sources really highlight this idea of attention saturation. Our mental bandwidth is just consumed. News, notifications, endless scrolling. We're often mentally fatigued before we even get to a real person-to-person interaction.
Which means we ration our social energy.
Right.
We stick to the safe stuff, like surface-level check-ins, easy topics, quick, low-risk things, and avoiding anything uncomfortable.
Exactly. There's this tendency to gravitate towards positive only, or at least neutral interactions. Quick hits. And discomfort often gets instinctively linked with conflict, not growth. So when a conversation starts to get vulnerable or challenging, the reflex for many is to pull back, not lean in.
So the upshot is, relationships risk becoming more about convenience than actual depth. The real stuff, the struggles, the uncertainties, the messy truths, only comes out under very specific, rare conditions, like when there's finally enough time, trust, and energy all lined up.
Precisely. And those conditions seem increasingly hard to come by, which makes you ask, why? What are the deeper cultural and psychological roots making this feel so normal?
So what are those roots? Why does connection feel so shallow so often? Is it just information overload?
Overload is definitely a big piece of it, yeah. Think about it. We consume more emotional content daily through social media, news feeds, than maybe our ancestors did in months. That can genuinely lead to a kind of emotional numbness, even before we talk to anyone personally. But it's also about a shift towards more transactional social norms. We might subconsciously weigh relationships by their ROI, like what positive thing am I getting from this interaction, rather than seeing the person as just fundamentally part of our life. It's subtle, but it changes things.
So it's not just the sheer volume of stuff, but how we've started valuing the interactions themselves. And you mentioned shorter interactions too.
Right. Conversations get fragmented, quick texts, short calls, hurried hellos. It makes it really hard to build the kind of momentum you need for real vulnerability. And let's be honest, the way conflict plays out online, all the outrage cycles, it kind of teaches us that difficult conversations are exhausting, maybe even unsafe. And that feeling spills over into our offline interactions too. We shy away from the tough stuff.
Let's make this really concrete. Thinking about your own examples, like finding it hard to bring up subpersonalities or talk about your YouTube channel. These aren't just hobbies, right? They're personal, creative things, part of who you are. You mention them gently, not pushing. But people rarely ask more. And if they do, it feels kind of surface level. That silence or minimal response, it can feel like indifference, can't it? Even if you know it's probably just them not knowing how to engage.
Yeah, that's a really common experience. Take subpersonalities, those different facets like the inner critic, the playful child, the logical planner. For most people, unless they're into psychology or something similar, it's just unfamiliar ground. It feels abstract, maybe even a bit weird or intimidating. So there's that fear of saying the wrong thing, which leads to saying nothing much at all. It often boils down to a lack of practice and just being curious, asking, tell me more. And for you, talking about these isn't like discussing the weather, it's sharing a dimension of yourself. So being met with silence there feels different. more personal.
And the YouTube channel is similar, maybe. There's that weird dynamic where people know about it, but maybe don't follow closely. Plus, the whole social awkwardness around feeling like you're promoting something,
Yeah.
even when you're just sharing naturally. So you get the quick like or cool video, but not the deeper chat about the ideas, the effort. For you, it's not just videos. It's years of work, ideas, experiments. When no one asks, unprompted, it can feel like it only exists if you keep bringing it up.
Absolutely. The common thread here is that self-disclosure, without an equal measure of curiosity coming back, you're essentially opening doors to your inner world, and people are just kind of peering in politely from the hallway, not really stepping inside. And that directly echoes that boy who cried wolf feeling we talked about. You're sending out real signals, this matters to me, this is part of me, but they get acknowledged superficially at best, not really pursued. And over time, yeah, that definitely makes you less motivated to send those signals, even if the wolf, that deep desire for connection around these things is absolutely still there.
And this whole thing feels sharper now in our modern culture, doesn't it? This idea of being connection-rich, attention-poor. We've got so much novelty vying for our attention online that going deep takes real conscious effort. We swap real curiosity for a quick reaction, a thumbs up, instead of, wow, how did you come up with that? And creative work. Unless it's already got buzz, unless it's popular, it often feels undervalued. If your channel suddenly blew up, people might ask more, but that's about social proof, not the inherent value of your work itself.
But look, there are ways to respond, strategies suggested in the sources. First, try creating context, not just mentioning things. Frame it differently. Instead of, I have a YouTube channel, maybe try, I was exploring this idea on my channel about X and it made me wonder. Make it an invitation. Second, identify your engagers. Some people just aren't wired for depth in certain areas, or maybe ever. Focus your energy where you actually get some reciprocity. Third, seek out dedicated spaces, online communities, specific friend groups where these topics are already understood and valued. And finally, maybe the hardest one, lower the expectation of spontaneous engagement from everyone without lowering the value you place on your own work and inner life. Its worth isn't dependent on others asking about it, even though that validation feels good and is, human to want.
What really strikes me is that observation you made. Pretty much everyone says they feel starved for deep connection. They want it. But then when an actual opportunity pops up, there's hesitation. People default back to safe, shallow habits. It feels like this huge contradiction. Are your expectations just unrealistic? Too high for the world we live in?
It's such an important loop to notice because it shows that shared hunger is real. Most people do want that meaningful connection. But stepping into it in the moment, that feels different. Maybe they freeze up, unsure how to go deep, or they revert to small talk because it's familiar, less risky. Vulnerability can feel tiring, or like it needs the perfect time, which never comes. A lot of it could be skill atrophy, honestly. Deep conversation is like a muscle. If you don't use it regularly, you lose confidence in it. Plus, there's that emotional energy deficit. People are often just too drained. And yeah, a mismatch in risk tolerance. Vulnerability feels high stakes unless you're really sure it'll be met well.
So that loop you're describing is feel lonely, see a chance for connection, want it, but hesitate or play it safe. Moment passes, still feel lonely. Wow. And the really frustrating part is you offer the chance. They might even say they want what you're offering, in theory, but the interaction stays on the surface and ultimately nobody feels satisfied.
See, I wouldn't say your expectations are too high as in unreasonable. They're probably just higher than the current cultural default. Many people have unconsciously trained themselves or been trained by circumstance to expect connection to be fairly low effort, sporadic. Deep, sustained reciprocity takes more initiative, more energy than many are currently accustomed to giving. Your expectations are likely quite reasonable for what healthy, fulfilling connection looks like. They're just often mismatched with the average person's current capacity or habits.
And that mismatch helps explain the retreat, maybe. Turning inward to personal space, reflection, creative projects, or even AI, using those tools when human connection falls short. But then you bump up against that weird cultural stigma. People judging the use of AI for art or conversation, calling it inauthentic. It really makes you ask, if the villagers aren't showing up and professional help like therapy is out of reach for many, who's really at fault here? The person using the tools they have, or the culture that creates the gap?
That's such a sharp way to put it because it really reframes the whole thing. When those doors to human depth keep feeling closed, you naturally seek out other spaces that can meet that need. Reflection, creativity, maybe AI tools that can explore ideas without judgment or time limits. The irony is society often praises independence and self-reliance in theory, but then stigmatizes some of the very tools that make it possible, especially newer ones like AI. If you use AI for art or to bounce ideas around or even for a kind of conversational reflection, some people will dismiss it, oh, that's cheating or it's not real. They might not see that the reason you're turning there is precisely because the human alternatives kept, well, falling short. And yeah, therapy is great, but access is a huge issue.
So it completely flips the script on blame, doesn't it? It's not like the original fable where it's clear cut. The boy lied, consequences followed. In this modern version, you're not lying. You're being honest about your needs, your thoughts, your work. The villagers hear you, maybe, but choose not to engage deeply. Or they offer minimal help. Then, when you find alternatives like the tower or AI, they might judge you, even while you still wish they'd just climb the damn hill when you call.
Exactly. It forces a completely different moral question. Maybe the updated lesson isn't for the boy, but for the village. Perhaps it's something like, in a world full of real wolves, loneliness, burnout, isolation, it's not enough to just tell the boy to stop crying wolf, especially when he's not. We need to ask, why aren't the villagers showing up consistently? And why do they sometimes resent the tools the boy has to use to survive in their absence? Ugh, man. That shifts the whole dynamic towards mutual responsibility, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So the boy's responsibility is be honest, be clear, keep trying maybe. And the villager's responsibility. It's to actually respond in good faith when they can, or at the very least, not to resent the boy for finding other ways to keep watch when they don't.
And there's this crucial point about the fragility of initiative. One of the most precious and maybe most easily depleted resources in relationships isn't just time, it's the will to reach out, to offer yourself up. When calls for connection are consistently met with, well, with not much, it doesn't just sting in the moment. It teaches the caller to start rationing those attempts. Over time, this can lead to what you might call a quiet extinction of self-offering. People don't necessarily give up on connection entirely, but they stop putting their authentic selves out there as often because it feels too costly, too likely to just vanish into the void. So those protective layers you mentioned, reflection, creativity, AI, they aren't necessarily avoidance. They're often acts of self-preservation in an environment that isn't reliably responsive.
That really highlights the difference from Aesop. In his story, only the boy really suffers the consequences. The villagers are fine, just annoyed. But in this modern version, it feels like both sides lose out. You lose the feeling of being truly heard and seen. And the villagers, they lose the chance for that depth they supposedly crave. It's tragic, in a way. Many of them do want what's being offered on that hill, but they're so conditioned by distraction, caution, or just defaulting to the surface that they walk right past it, starving for depth while the meal is right there.
And that leads us right back to that stigma paradox. You might turn to a tool like AI because it offers consistent engagement, helps you process thoughts, maybe even co-create when human interaction feels unreliable or unavailable for that specific need. Yet, the societal narrative can be quick to dismiss that as less real or inauthentic, often without acknowledging the underlying conditions, the lack of time, energy, accessible support that created the need for such tools in the first place. It really is like the villagers ignoring the boy's calls for help and then turning around and criticizing the design of the tower he built to protect himself.
Wow, okay, so wrapping this up, maybe the most profound takeaway from this whole deep dive is this. Your modern boy, the one calling out with stories and truths, he isn't crying wolf. He's doing something potentially, well, more world-changing in a quiet way. He's learning how to live, how to watch for wolves, maybe even thrive, without always needing the villagers. And if enough people start building their own towers, relying on their own resources, the whole structure of the village, the whole idea of mutual reliance, it starts to shift, doesn't it?
That's a powerful thought to end on. This isn't just about individual feelings or frustrations. It could signal a larger cultural shift. A fraying of the fabric of mutual care, happening not through big, dramatic betrayals, but through countless small, quiet silences. A million unanswered calls. So the question for all of us, maybe, the thing to mull over is, what small act could you do this week? Could you climb someone's hill just for a moment? Could you validate someone's tower, acknowledge the work they're doing to keep their own wolves at bay? What might that look like in your own life?